So if your family is important to you, then clearly that means you should be putting family time dedicated without distractions into your calendar and making sure that they know it and they see you living that out consistently. So
Welcome to the Dad Central Show. Today, we're going to be talking about knowing how I'm doing as a dad. And we're going to talk about three areas today: the struggle that all dads face, three ways to know how you're doing, and growth over perfection. So, have you ever asked yourself, am I actually doing a good job as a dad? If so, you're not alone. Today, we're going to unpack practical ways that you can know where you're at and how to keep moving forward. So we always want to, as a theme, we want to say today, every dad wants to know that if they're doing well, but measuring that isn't always clear. So in this episode, we'll explore what matters most, how to recognize progress, and where to focus when doubts creep in. Drew, how we doing today?
that's about it. How are you?
I am doing outstanding. A little bit of a technical challenge getting things correct today, but I'll settle with what we're at. But what's been going on in your world? What's been going on? How's back to school time?
Yeah. Well, as an email I sent out today to our list, back to school offers, we'll say opportunity, but really what it does is it creates stress for the kids, creates stress for parents as a result. And in that email, I sent out some interesting stats just on, the impact of school and this transition into school on our children. And the fact is, one of the stats that blew my mind is that 90% of parents surveyed said that they experienced like stress or anxiety around the school startup. So we did some podcasts that I think would be helpful for parents around like recognizing signs. So I think I'm experiencing that. We just had an incident today at our daughter's school. So yeah, it's trying to figure out how you navigate all those things and provide the support for our kids, but also provide the support and care for we need for ourselves too.
Yeah. Want to just say also, you're watching the Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And as always, we are sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So, Drew, when we look at this subject, how I'm doing as a dad, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, uh, I don't know what my initial thoughts are. Is that
Especially
I
after
think
what's
it's hard.
okay.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Some days you might feel like, man, I rocked it as a dad. Other days you'd be like, I don't even know if I'm cut out for this thing. I just think that's, whether that's me because my reflections on myself, I might be hard on myself. I'm not sure if other dads are, or if it's just simply the fact that, you know, um, just when you feel like you might be getting this thing, your kids change or circumstances change or something unforeseen comes up and you're kind of smacked in the face realizing maybe I don't really know what I got going on here. And maybe I need to keep working at this. So yeah, I think it's a ongoing challenge depending on kind of the dad's background and aptitude or interest or focus on this whole parenting challenge. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's start off with our first topic segment, the struggle that all dads face. And I think it's just building on what you just shared initially about it's a struggle that all dads face. No dad ever has it on. What are your thoughts on what it's a struggle that all dads face?
Well, you know, doubts I think are common. In the work that we've done in supporting organizations and dads specifically, dads sometimes question like, am I doing enough? Or maybe the question is like, how can I do all of this? We feel pulled in so many different directions. Our children are very important to us. We want them to know and feel loved by us. And I think that that's depending on the dad's makeup. They can be hard on themselves and beat themselves up over maybe things that they didn't do as well as they wanted, or they may just kind of throw their hands up, and be like, "Man, like, it seems like I'm always getting it wrong, so why am I going to try?" I don't know. I think most dads, based on our data and based on our experiences, they want to be really positively involved and active in their child's life, and they really care and love their children deeply and want to see their children be successful. Um, I think there's a lot of questioning themselves, and many of them may not have had the best influence or example of how to do that process well, and so it can be a very awkward, unsure place to be in. I think that's a real struggle for most dads.
Yeah, I'll just add on here that how many dads come into dadhood with a playbook, right? And we also have to take a look. There are dads out there that didn't have a father figure in their life. So there's
Right.
an component on there. So even if you had a father in your life, it may not have been the best one. And if you did have the best one or a good one, there were probably some things that weren't addressed. And I was having a conversation with a gentleman yesterday who I'd never met before. We got into a deep, like 45-minute conversation about like how he was raised. And um, he had to manage a son himself that is very potentially violent or aggressive. And you know, there was nothing in his playbook on how to manage that. And let alone his relation with his father wasn't the greatest either. So he was really going in on uncharted waters, let alone being father, but also doing fathering with an aggressive son. And it was a great conversation. Actually, I'd like to have him on the show. It was a really good story because it was very unique on how he managed it, how he handled it. But it's a really good deep dive story. So I think that again, most ads we don't got a playbook, you know, and I
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, that's the exact reason I created the dad's roadmap, which is that 5 stage process to go from feeling kind of unsure, stressed, overwhelmed to much more confident, calm, and connected. So, yeah, that's our attempt at actually giving dads a playbook, and of course, the podcast is a big part of that, sharing elements of what's in the foundational elements of our dad's roadmap, which is part of our dad mentor program. So, I'm not trying to plug it here, but I want to say you're right, Ed, that we don't have necessarily a great playbook. And the most basic leadership principle is that people do what people see. And so if we've haven't seen healthy relationships around us, especially in our formative years or early life, then we generally reproduce those types of unhealthy patterns in our life, unless we're doing the work and we're trying to recognize and then make the adjustments necessary and doing things different than what we experienced. And so I think that is the challenge, for sure.
Yeah, before we move on to our next segment, for all dads, fathers, male caregivers out there, I'm going to give you a line of calm. Every dad wrestles with self doubt, and it's a sign that you care. So don't worry, it's a sign of caring. So don't beat up on yourself. It's a sign of caring. Let's move on to our next segment. 3 ways to know how you're doing. Drew, 3 ways. And maybe you want to add some ways that you maybe check in on how you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your role, as father, number one thing is, how is your relationship with your children, or how's your relationship with those closest to you, your partner, maybe even your parents. Now, it doesn't mean that they all have to be in line and perfect. No, but I mean, the most immediate way to know is, what are your kids saying about you as their dad, and what is your partner saying, or maybe they're not saying about you as the partner. And so, that to me is one of the most important and vital ways, because at the end of the day, based on the research, what makes the biggest difference for children is the quality, and having sort of warm, loving, connected relationships with their father. Fathers can provide, we'll say physically, they can provide, financially, in terms of making sure there's a home, there's things, but at the end of the day, that's only one small aspect that our children need, and relationally is the areas that they need the most, and often we hear that they're starved and the most hungry for. So that is, I think, primary. How you're doing as a dad really is a function of what are the relationships, and what type of feedback are you getting from your children, and how they relate with you and your partner and how they relate with you. So I think it's hard to say, but that external feedback is certainly a very important indicator.
Before I move on further, I want to get your thoughts on this. You mentioned relationship with a father and partner. What about his relationship with himself?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say yes, because naturally, the more that you're aware and understand and know yourself, generally, the better you can bring your whole self, or the certainly the parts that you want to bring it to relationship with others. Sometimes we what we bring in relationships stems from things that we've just long held patterns, sometimes limiting beliefs, sometimes subconscious, sometimes all things from it, but we're not actually consciously aware of them, and so therefore they sometimes derail or sabotage or wreck our relationships. So I think that's a very valid point, Ed. But you do still have the ability to um, get this feedback from others in the process. I would say there's nothing linear. It's certainly very interconnected. But I think you're right. That's a great point too.
Yeah, and the reason why I brought up that, reflecting back to the conversation I had with the gentleman yesterday, he's a public speaker, been doing it for a long time, and he talked about mindfulness, the aspect of
Mhm.
mindfulness as a father, and maybe that's a separate episode we can do about fatherhood and mindfulness in itself. Could be an upcoming episode. I also just want to add on there, consistency of your actions. Daily choices matter more than the occasional grand gesture. So consistency, doing the right things, especially well, just in general, but especially since we're on this show, involving the parenting on a consistent basis is great. And then also personal alignment with values. Are you living the dad you want to be? Do anything else you want to add onto those points?
Yeah, I'd like to add for both of those. What I like is that they're really measuring your you can measure those things like consistent. So, every day, do I greet my children with a smile? Do I say their name in, playful, fun, warm, affectionate ways? Do I, am I there and listening to them on a daily basis and a consistent, what I like about that is that, if you are, because our kids constantly grow and change, and sometimes the feedback may differ, but if you can say, I know that showing up at for my child, at bedtime, I'm always there to give them a hug, to say a positive word, or to listen to anything that they want to share with me, and I do that as consistent as I can, then even if they don't always respond well, I can know that my actions are in line with the value of being present for my child. And so what's what I like about the being able to measure your consistency, as well as recognizing, are you making choices that align with who you are and the values you hold? And so, that doesn't mean it's everyday thing, but it's a consistent thing. So somebody who is, got a job where they're not always home all the time, their consistency can be that when they are home, that they make that 10-15 minute time with their child a priority, and they always protect it, and it's in their calendar. So that's still consistent, and it's still sending that same message, right? So we're not talking about like everything has to be every day, but what it is it set? Is it reliable? Can your children count on you? And does it match with the things that you say or how you live your life as important values? So if your family is important to you, then clearly that means you should be putting family time dedicated without distractions into your calendar and making sure that they know it and they see you living that out consistently. So, I mean, these are just examples, but what I like about these last two, if you are seeing yourself consistently doing these things, then I'd say it's a good measure for yourself. Say, hey, I am showing up and being the dad that I say that I want to be. Now, let's be honest. This is one of the greatest challenges I would say of being a dad is to be consistent. So don't. I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm trying to say, but work to have a standard and do your best to follow through on that. And when you don't meet that standard, be forgiving and give yourself grace, but also communicate to your family that I know that you've come to rely on this and I wasn't able to. It is important to me. I'm sorry I wasn't able to, but I'm going to continue moving and working towards that. I think those are reasonable, but you do have to start with having, I think, a pretty good standard and working towards that.
Excellent. Our last segment is growth over perfection. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, this has been, I think, a consistent theme over the last, oh, slew of podcasts that we've recorded. Uh, you don't have to be perfect. You just got to get better. And as I've shared, my Hall of Fame university coach Larry Haler used to say to us, "Hey guys, what if we just all got 1% better each day? 1% better. How much better do you think collectively would be by the end of the season?" When you hear 1% better, you're like, "Hey, that's doable. I can do that." It's kind of like the same saying, like inch by inch, life's a cinch, but by the yard, it's hard. Meaning that just what's the 1 inch? What's the 1% that you can work on today or that you can plan for tomorrow to get you move forward as a dad? And so I feel like that's really important, as opposed to saying that it has to be done perfect every single time. And one of the areas that I think is the good 1% to focus on is how well do you repair? How well do you repair relationships, or how well do you recover when, let's say, things don't go well or exactly how you wanted? I think that's a really important area, and that really refocuses on the relationship where dads often struggle to do that. And I'd say that to me is important. The other part, I'm not trying to steal all of our content here without giving you anything to say ahead, but the other part of this is, finding ways to celebrate both for yourself as well as a family when you've made that progress. When you guys when you see yourself improving and showing up the way you want, you should acknowledge that and you should celebrate that and find ways to also celebrate with your family. Anyways, Ed, over to you.
No, I think you covered that stem to stern. I don't think there's anything much I want to add on to that last section. It was well done. So, all I'm going to say is let's review what we chatted about today. So, first things first, we talked about the struggle all dads face. Then we talked about 3 ways to know how you're doing. Then we closed off with growth over perfection and just some action steps for those who are listening out there or watching. Ask for feedback from your kids or your partner. And also notice daily actions that align with your values. And then reflect regularly and celebrate progress. So, as we start wrapping up here, I'm going to say, dads, the fact that you're asking how you're doing already shows that you care. Keep checking in, keep growing, and remember, your presence matters more than your perfection. Drew, do we have a resource for our listeners and our community?
Yeah, so for me, a big part of what we've explored today maps onto our dad's roadmap, which is 5 stages. Our dad's roadmap right now is part of our dad mentor membership community, but we're actually in the process of building out a new resource. And so first, when Dad Mentor reopens, you should definitely look at considering joining Dad Mentor, because not only does it give you the foundational pieces that we've explored here, it gives you that sense of that community aspect where we all get together with other dads and we share wins, we hold each other accountable, and we explore some of the challenges together. So that community piece, I think, is a great supplement and very like apply. And that's one resource. The other thing is we will be releasing this new resource very soon. And that to me is going to be a very valuable tool for dads who want to apply these principles and continue to grow as a dad each and every day.
Excellent. Well, as always, I want to say thank you for taking the most valuable thing, your time, to either watching or listening to Dad Central. And always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace. And we'll see you soon.